Everyone who has an email account knows what spam is and usually just deletes it once or twice a week without looking. For me, it has become one of those New Year's resolutions that you make without intending to keep them. My wife and I were out with a group of friends to celebrate and see in the new year when, during a group break, we all decided to share our New Year's resolutions. Most had the same old promises about becoming a better version of themselves, or about getting into better physical shape by losing a few pounds. My promise was to reduce the amount of spam I receive by 75%. Someone said, "Good luck with that. Your email address is being sold to anyone who is willing to pay for it." This became the joke of the evening because everyone thought it was the dumbest New Year's resolution they had ever heard. By the end of the evening, they were making bets with each other how long I would last. Their constant ridicule of me angered me. Although I decided it was better not to show it, I decided that I would definitely prove them wrong. And here I am, sitting in front of the computer on New Year's Day, beginning the endless journey of unsubscribing from all these unwanted emails. This was difficult because I had 3 email addresses, all going into my Outlook account. I had to move every email from my spam folder to my inbox and then delete it after unsubscribing 3 times. I thought it would be an easy task, but the reality was different. Some of them couldn't be unsubscribed. Others would redirect you to another site if you tried, and the ones that you could unsubscribe from, in my case, had to be done on a per-email address basis because some didn't show who they were sent to. I had 2 cups of coffee and looked through about 40 spam emails when I received an email that just didn't make sense. It was like this. Insta girls. Today we found a match for you within 10 miles. Attached was a photo of the lady with the caption underneath. I just want you hot and ready, laying naked next to me tonight. Click the connect button to start building a connection right now. I couldn't deal with it until I sorted out my thoughts. I just filed it away for now and continued going about my business until I heard my better half wake up. It wasn't a good morning for her as she was suffering from a hangover. After I gave her a couple of painkillers and a couple of anti-inflammatory pills, I put her back to bed. I made myself a fried egg sandwich and ate it before checking to make sure she was asleep. I'm back to work cleaning out my spam folder. Over the next 3 hours, I went through 120 such letters. I now had 3 such letters from Instagirls in the archive. Each one had a different photo of the woman, but all the messages were the same. The problem is that I recognized the faces of the 3 ladies whose photographs were presented. One was my wife, and the other 2 were my wife's longtime best friends, since they met while attending Penn State University. The emails used their pictures but not their names. For me, this provided an opportunity to begin an investigation. I looked at myself, my wife's best friend's husband, and her other friend's husband. We've all had jobs that required us to be away from home at night, with a schedule that varied from week to week depending on how our employers set it. For example, I worked 4 days after 3 and then 3 days after 4, which ultimately gave me 4 hours of overtime each pay period, which was 2 weeks. I took a break because I needed a rest. My shift at the plant started at 8 in the evening today and ended at 8 in the morning the next day. During this time, I spent time behind a welder's mask. At $30 an hour, it was a decent wage considering where we lived, so we didn't have any money problems. As I was leaving the factory the next day, I asked one of my tech-savvy colleagues how I could save a bunch of spam emails that I suspected so that none of the embedded information would be lost. He suggested sending a copy to a flash drive that could not be erased. He explained that by doing this, it would be as if they were always on the computer. I stopped at Best Buy on the way home. The store clerk directed me to the right product. After the purchase, I went home. I knew that Sue Ellen, my wife of 5 years, would go to the gym for a daily workout with her girlfriends. This has been their routine every weekday since they graduated from Penn State. I worked on my spam folder until noon before heading to bed. I found 6 more letters with the same thing. With 3 in the archive, I transferred 9 to a new flash drive. I was on my way to bed to get some sleep when the factory called. The plant's night manager has resigned and will leave at the end of the month. His position required him to work the evening shift 5 days a week, and it was a salaried position. The week started from Sunday to Thursday. The starting salary was $125,000 per year. They asked me if I wanted it. I said yes. Every day for the next 3 weeks, I faithfully worked on my spam files, which became fewer and fewer. My collection of emails from Instagirls grew by an average of 6 per day. On the third Sunday, we invited Sue Ellen's best friends and their husbands over for dinner. I began to suspect. Over the course of the evening, I took a running photo of the 3 ladies together, making sure to get close-ups of their faces. I had 8 days left before I started my new position. I wanted a close-up of 3 best friends for personal use. During dinner, I announced to everyone present the news of my promotion, and that I would be taking Thursday through Sunday that week off to give me time to prepare for my new schedule. Everyone congratulated me, including my wife. I noticed a change in her mood as soon as I revealed this. I thought it was because I was forced to change her routine and nothing else. What the 3 ladies didn't know was that I had received photographs of their school days at the University of Pennsylvania as undergraduate students. These images of them from that time were consistent with what was shown in the letters from Instagirls. At the time, I wondered why and knew I had no means of proving or disproving it. On Wednesday, I told my wife that I would need to attend a meeting on Thursday to review my new situation. I needed to be there by 10 in the morning, and I didn't know how long it would take. I did this to give her a feeling of security. Little did she know that my assignment was at the FBI field office located next to the only shopping center in town. I was going there to hopefully find out the truth behind those Instagirls emails. The field officer at the local FBI office was a very nice lady. I noticed that she is not wearing a wedding ring. She introduced herself as Ruth Susan Truscott. Ruth was about my age and a real beauty. Even in professional clothes, you knew she was attractive. With brown eyes, long brown hair, full breasts, full luscious lips. If I was free, she could become the object of my daytime dreams. I thought for a moment that she might be a same-sex lover. I told her my story as I understood it and what brought me here before her. She said, "These letters are all linked to an overseas sex site that we were trying to infiltrate to shut it down. You are not the first to bring us this data." "Then I may have the connection you need," I explained. "The 3 letters I have from the 3 specific ladies whose photographs are used are from their student days at the University of Pennsylvania. I have more than 3 weeks of these letters on a flash drive here. I'm here because these 3 ladies are my wife and her 2 friends." Ruth's eyes lit up when I handed her my flash drive. She seemed to be interested in something because she said, "You can't be serious. I found these letters, 3 weeks old, in my spam for the last month. Each one is sent from a different address, but the message is the same. You will also find a recent photograph of the 3 ladies, their maiden names, their legal addresses and married names," I said, handing her the flash drive. "I also provided you with their dates of birth and social security numbers because I was so concerned. I also made sure to get their current image as close as possible to how they were depicted in the yearbooks." "You can see what a breakthrough this could be for us," she said, uploading their university photos into facial recognition software. It took about 3 minutes until the computer announced that they had a match on all 3. "Jack Daniel Patterson, you hit the nail on the head," Ruth said. "These 3 ladies have been on our watch list for many years. Until today, we haven't been able to link their images to anyone real. The first thing we'll do is check for everything we can find. These may be nothing more than stolen images used under false names. If so, I can inform you within a few days." "With the history of Pennsylvania State University," I said, "we can't be sure. I would appreciate it if you could keep me updated." "Is your mobile phone connected to your wife's phone?" she asked. "No, but I have a second number on it that she doesn't know about," I explained. "My employer just set him up as a confidential contact for me and senior management." "Then this is the number I will contact you on," she said. "When I have questions, I need answers to, or more news to share." After I gave it to her, I said, "Make a note to remind yourself to only call me in the morning. At noon, it is turned off, so I can sleep because I work at night." "What do you do for a living, if I may ask?" Ruth said. Until this week, I worked 12-hour shifts as an industrial welder, I said. Starting this Sunday, I will become the new night shift manager at the plant. Ruth smiled and said, Is that the Overton Farm Equipment Company that builds all kinds of horse trailers, flatbeds, and truck trailers? Yes, I said, completely surprised. How do you know? My stepfather is the person you are replacing, she explained. Mom and he bought Casey's to run. After 20 years, he's looking forward to a normal life with regular hours. After leaving, I went to the bank to set up a new account. With the help of the bank representative, I was able to redirect my new payroll to him and arrange for the current net paycheck to be transferred to our regular account for now. I did this because I was worried that the FBI would find out, because my gut told me there was more to this situation than it seems. Most will never know how much I hoped I was wrong. I began to suspect that my thoughts about my wife and her friends might be correct because my wife had not been acting like her usual self for the past 4 days. She was irritable, distant, and sullen. My changes in plans caused her problems. Her behavior proved this. The problem is that she couldn't tell me why. This only created doubts, because until now in our relationship, I thought that she was honest. On Sunday at 7 o'clock in the evening, as I was leaving the house for work, I noticed a change in my wife's behavior. Right before I left the house, she decided she needed to take a quick shower. Her explanation was that she felt the need to be completely clean at night. This made me wonder why. I stopped at the older neighbor's house at the end of a cul-de-sac on my way to work and asked him if he would like to pay attention when my wife went out and came back within a week or two. He agreed because it would help him try to restructure his sleep. After his last hospital stay, he was in a terrible state. With this done, I went to work. It had been 2 weeks since I visited my neighbor, so this Sunday when I stopped by, he was ready. He prepared a detailed list of dates, times of her departure, and times of her return. In total, they showed that she left between 8 and 9 in the evening 4 nights a week, and returned between 2 and 4 the next morning. More importantly, it established a pattern of behavior that I felt was worth exploring. His house was perfect for what he did for me. He was standing on the corner of our small neighborhood at a 3-way traffic light. There was only one entry and one exit. Since the company I worked for had set up an internal email address for me on their computer system, I composed an email detailing what I learned and how I learned it and sent it to Ruth's email address that was on the card, which was given to me. I then sent Ruth Susan Truscott a text message, telling her to look for an email from me and indicating the address I had sent it from. I was sitting at home early Monday morning, working on removing more spam, when my work number called. My wife, Sue Ellen, was at the gym with her friends. "Good morning, Jack," said Ruth. "Thanks for the information. I need to know the working hours of the other 2 husbands because we want to track their wives as well." "George works at St. Francis Hospital as a nurse," I answered. "Ben is a full-time cop. The only thing I can say is that they both work nights, just like me. All 3 of us work 12-hour shifts. Looks like you're on to something." "We found it," said Ruth. "I can't say more because the investigation is still in its early stages. I can say that you and your friends are 3 blind mice. For now, it's best for everyone involved to leave things as they are." Her words made me think about my relationship with my wife over the years. Sue Ellen, or Susie, as she preferred to be called, is still a very stylish lady. To those from the Deep South, she was a typical lady, too graceful in nature to attract my attention, so I initially ignored it. Susie became my neighbor through my parents' farm. I stopped by unexpectedly because I wanted to borrow my dad's old scythe to cut 5 feet of grass and weeds on a piece of land outside of town that I had bought with the help of the bank through a tax sale. Since the owner died, I took ownership immediately. My idea was to clean it up and sell it when I was free. 28 acres of land consisted of hills covered with trees. It was perfect. I just wanted to clean up the front and back yards before checking out the rest of the property. I worked on this for about 2 hours. I just drove up to the house and started cutting the grass from there. I piled everything I found in front of the car, planning to deal with it later. So far, There hasn't been anything serious. Susie pulled up next to my truck in a fairly new model Beetle. Putting a fantastically wide-brimmed hat on her head, she got out of the car. I stopped and walked up to her. "How can I help you, Mrs. Rowe?" I asked, leaning on the tool at the side of my truck. She smiled as she handed me a Coke and said, "Are you always this serious with young ladies you just met?" "Yes, it is immediately obvious to most women that I am not marriage material," I replied. "It saves both of us a lot of hassle." "Maybe you just misunderstood me," she quickly retorted. "There may be other reasons for me being here." "The only way that could be true," I said, "is if you were coming from Sunday service and going door to door to get your service hours. Maybe that's the case. You're a religious man trying to convert me." "Well, I visited your mother, as you well know, and she can be quite edifying," said Susie. "She asked me to bring you lunch and something to drink." I laughed and took it from her hands and put it in the back of the truck. "She also said that I should make sure you eat it," she said. I wanted to curse, but I didn't. So I took it, lowered the back door, and started eating egg salad sandwiches. Susan Ellen started laughing and said, "When you're angry, you show it without saying a word. I think it's cute." "She must learn that I declared my independence many years ago," I said, "and she should stop playing her matchmaker games. She always chooses women with character, whose high demands are visible in their image," I said. "They're not worth the salt during difficult times." That's how it all started. When she left, I thought she would never come back, but I was wrong. My mom told her about my work schedule. The next time, Susie showed up in a nice Ford truck, dressed in jeans, and started working with me. She bought a brand new bush trimmer which, once we figured out how it worked, cut down on cleaning time significantly. After we cleaned up the yard, we went inside the house to see if it was worth saving or not. It was impractical. "What are you going to do about it?" Susie asked as we looked around the house. "It will cost less to tear it down than to fix it." "That's the impression I had when I bet on it," I said. "Now that the main yard is cleared, I will take measurements and divide it into sections. If planned out correctly, I will have one central road in the middle, with 4 cul-de-sacs leading out of it. I will keep the section with the largest land for myself." "So you're going to split it?" Susie said in surprise. "And then build a new house there for yourself?" "That's the whole idea, because this way I won't have a mortgage," I said. "This will make it easier to finance raising a family. But first, I have to see if I can sell the wood." She forced us to go on our first date because I still wasn't interested. She just kept checking to see if I was there to work on the place. Susie just wasn't my type. But she was persistent and continued to pursue me. More than a year later, we got married. Her second romantic novel sold steadily in the online market. I read some of it and thought it was just vulgar content for women. Based on what I now knew, it didn't make sense because she didn't act like that in our own bedroom. Until now, I thought it was a big fantasy, but now I was no longer sure about it. I asked myself questions about what she did and who she spent time with on her nights out. I've asked her many times what she does while I'm working, and she explains that she's doing research or working on her next novel. Because she incorporated the corporation, her writing activities were owned by the corporation, so the tax rate was much lower due to where she was incorporated. I worked hard for what I did. She could sit at home and type it on the computer. Now, looking back, I tried to understand why she and her friends moved to this region in the first place. It didn't make sense because neither of them had family here unless it was their choice. It got me thinking for a couple of days about the details of her characters in the raunchy books she wrote. Since the main female character could be her, were the men she wrote about former lovers or current ones? It was while I was working on clearing more spam that everything clicked. The girl's name in the Instagirls letter was the name of the main female character in her books. The next question I had to ask myself was whether the FBI was interested in this. Using my home computer, I copied and emailed the web address to my work account, which led to a page that offered her books. That night, I sent an email to Ruth Susan Truscott. In it, I explained that these were the 7 books she published from the time I met her to the present. using a pseudonym. I believe she is the main female character, so could these books actually be a diary of her lovers or clients? I pointed out that the male characters in her books are described in such detail that they seem real. Since the men in her book were all respected in their community and considered elite, could she have used real people as fictional characters? If she reads the books, she will see that each book is like a chapter in an ongoing story. All the books describe the ongoing sexual relationships of a married woman with 5 men in her life. Each of the men provided her with different types of sexual satisfaction, having ongoing relationships with her without knowing about the others. I sent her a text message to let her know about the letter. I was not surprised that there was no response from Ruth. As she said, the husbands of Susie's friends and I are 3 blind mice. Since I didn't hear back from her, I assumed that my suspicions might be correct. I had no choice but to play the waiting game. 6 months passed, and on Thursday morning as I left the factory, I saw Ruth Truscott waiting for me. This was the first time I saw her in jeans. Ruth was definitely my type. Healthy with a little meat on the bones, designed for comfort more than speed. It would be nice to have dinner with her. Getting lost in her arms would be like resting on the clouds. "Someone gave me a ride, Jack," Ruth said. "We need to have a long, confidential conversation somewhere where no one can hear us." "Let's go through McDonald's," I suggested. "Then we can take our morning menu and eat at one of the picnic tables in the Jackson City Park. No one will disturb us there, even if someone is nearby." "This is perfect," Ruth said. I opened the passenger door of the truck for her, let her sit, then walked around and sat on the other side. She opened up to herself, and I found out that she was not dating. "Is it because the type of people you encounter have put you off a little bit from serious relationships?" I asked. Ruth thought about this for a while, and it was only when we received our order that she responded. "Your question may have hit the mark," Ruth said. "In my work, you see the reality of our world. To start a relationship, I think we all go into it wearing some sort of rose-colored glasses." "There's a lot of logic in that comment," I said. "When I saw the picture of my wife in those letters, I began to look at our relationship and learned a lot of things that weren't adding up. I guess you could say I learned to take off my glasses. I believe you're going to tell me that my suspicions are correct." "And what does your intuition tell you?" asked Ruth. "That my wife and her friends were recruited while attending Penn State," I said. "Then sent here to organize this area. They are high-quality, easily accessible girls, trained to serve powerful people or those who can influence a situation." "Pretty sure. Each lady is only allowed to have 4 clients," said Ruth. "The clients are of the upper class. Your wife, for example, comes from a fairly powerful group. One of them is a federal district court judge with an annual income of almost $200,000. The second is our local representative in the Senate. The third is the chief surgeon at Southeastern Hospital, and the fourth was our district leader until his arrest this morning." By this time, we had already reached the park. As we exited my truck, we grabbed our food and coffee and sat on the bench. "Interpol took control of the overseas portion of the international operation last week," Ruth said. "They managed to get everything. Each client paid $4,000 a month, of which they received $500. The rest of the money went to the women without paying taxes. Your wife was at the top of the chain. Everyone who fell for the bait was tested. Many only got online communication and nothing more. Their main money machines were women, like your wife." I think my face said it all because Ruth said, "Her books are what you thought they were. Her diary. This part of her life is legit. We haven't found her overseas account yet, but we know she's in the business. For 8 years already. Almost 6 years in this place. More than 6,000 of these high-class available girls have been overthrown all over the world. It was organized by the Russian mafia." "I'm here to warn you," Ruth said. "Your wife and her friends will be arrested at the gym this morning and charged with sex trafficking, tax evasion, and fraud. All of this will be combined under the RICO Act. They will all receive long sentences." I was torn, but I said, "I need to get tested to make sure I don't have an STD and find a good divorce lawyer." "2 more things. We have a bounty on this group a long time ago. $700,000 will be paid to you once we get a successful conviction, Ruth said. The next 2 weeks are going to be very busy for both of us, but then I'd like to get to know you better. Ruth, I like it too, I said. I think I'll lose a few friends when this all comes out. I drove her to the office and watched her walk to her car and unlock the trunk. She put on her holster and vest and hung up her badge so it was visible. I rolled down the side window. She came up to me and said, "I'm on the team that will arrest your wife. Do you have any message for her?" "Just tell her that this is the information I gave you because of what I found in my email," I said. "This is what brought about their downfall." "Maybe I will," Ruth said with a smile, "because it was the system that ruined them all." When I arrived home, I sent a message to both of my wife's best friends, saying that the three of us were three blind mice, and that our wives would be arrested by the FBI in the morning. If they wanted to know what I knew, they could call after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I set the alarm for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, turned off the phone, and went to bed. I woke up at 2 thanks to my alarm clock and took a shower first. He turned on his mobile phone. I had 5 voicemails on my answering machine. 1 from Ruth, 1 from each of my 2 husbands, 1 from my mother, and 1 from my employer. The company, when I called back, heard about the arrest and offered to let me take the night off. I accepted it. I told him I would call the team leader to let him know what needed to be done, and then go on Friday night to set things up for the weekend so as not to lose any production time. I called Ruth, who told me that the 3 ladies had been taken to St. Louis and would remain in custody until their bail hearing, which was scheduled for Monday. She asked me if I could go out for dinner. I said I had to answer the other blind mice's call before I could answer this. After 2 quick phone calls, the other women's husbands will come to find out what I know at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I called my mom and learned that my wife's arrest had made the lunchtime news. I promised her I'd stop by on Friday to tell both my parents what I knew before I went to work. After the call, Ruth said that dinner was scheduled. She said she would text me with the time and location as soon as she was free. I still had half an hour, so I looked through my wife's personal dresser and makeup table for the first time in my life. Most of this time was spent discovering a well-hidden little notebook with a routing code for bank transfers from her overseas accounts to our local bank. His current balance was indicated there. I knew I had to give it to Ruth, but first I was going to talk to a computer colleague I knew. Ben and George arrived together, both looking the way I felt. All 3 of us had our lives, as we knew them, pulled out from under us. After I bought them a beer, we sat down and I told them everything from my New Year's resolution to today. "So you suspected," Ben said, "but I didn't have anything concrete until this morning." "That's right," I said. "Even at first, the FBI believed that our wives' images were stolen and used." "Damn, if you said anything, it would blow up in your face," George added. "We were all deceived from the very beginning." "The FBI agent I dealt with," I said, "told me that we are 3 blind mice, and that it must remain that way for now. Based on what was revealed to me today, I can understand why. Everything was done this way mainly for our own protection." "The question is, when will we learn something new?" Ben asked. "The ladies' bail hearing is on Monday," I said. "Since this is such an international case, I'm guessing there will be a major press release from the FBI in Washington tomorrow morning. The agent told me they are making arrests all over the country today. I'll be hiring my divorce lawyer tomorrow." "Does anyone have an idea why our wives chose us?" asked George. "My gut tells me this was all planned during the Obama presidency," I said. "When a lot of things were done because people looked away. Even in our society today, we barely scratch the surface of what they did. The more I learn, the more I believe we will never know what was done, because the Democrats are throwing everything forces against the current administration to hide the truth. Our wives chose us because our political opinions made it impossible for anyone to believe that we could fall for what they were telling us," I added. "We were too trusting and accepted what they said without question. All 3 of us are conservative by nature, but we have a liberal point of view regarding the behavior of others," I explained. "We follow the law because of our respect for the law. Those who have a different political point of view believe that the law does not apply to them. This is what allowed the Russian mafia to get in like this, because I think we will find that the liberals were their largest clients. You're right, Jack. We in the state police department have found that 3/4 of the crimes committed are committed by liberals or ardent Democrats who believe that they are above the law, Ben said. And nothing we say or do will change their beliefs, not even having to serve a sentence for their actions. Well, Sue Ellen always voted for the Democrats all along the line. I voted for the person who I thought would do the best job for that particular position. The problem was her own greed. She could have walked away and no one would have known. Your wives could have done the same. They didn't understand that in time, the truth always finds its way out. I then pulled out and showed them the book I found and said, "Looks like these are the codes for my wife's offshore accounts. I'm not sure, but I'm going to check with someone I trust before I give it to the FBI on Friday. To you. It might be a good idea to search your house tonight, because as soon as I hand over this, you'll most likely be issued a search warrant. Once the feds get it, they'll confiscate the funds as proceeds of crime," Ben said. "Can you wait until Monday morning before handing this over?" "Yes, I can, but we didn't talk about anything, right?" I asked. "And we voluntarily hand over what we find to the field office on Monday morning before our wives' bail hearing." "What to talk about?" both of them said with huge smiles. The address Ruth gave me wasn't a restaurant, so I used Google Maps to get there. It turned out that this was her private home. I was surprised to see that it was a nice house from the outside. I wish I could say we discussed business, but we didn't. It was time to get to know each other a little better. I left around 11 p.m. with plans to meet on Saturday. After leaving her house, I headed to the plant to check how things were going. I spoke to the group leader who gave me his approval to take the geek along since he was way ahead in his project. Once I explained what happened and what I found, he went to work using the web to identify what he could find. The web address took us to the bank where we entered a bunch of numbers, and voila, her account appeared. We were both shocked to learn how much money she had. Within an hour and a half, he transferred 20% from 4 different accounts and dated it 3 days ago. With my permission, he took the amount needed to pay off his mortgage. He opened 2 new accounts in another offshore bank for himself and me. Your wife has invested her money wisely and bought some large shares cheaply in the past, he said. The FBI will have a hard time confiscating this, if at all. When you give it to them, explain that under state law, what's in these accounts is community property. That gives you the right to half of it. In divorce court, if it comes up, just say you did it to protect some of your capital. I couldn't do this without your help, I openly admitted. So thanks in advance. I sent a text message to Ben and George about what I had learned. I worked 3 or 4 hours, scheduling production for the weekend to make sure no one would be idle before heading home. For some reason, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I think I had too many thoughts. I got up around 7 in the morning and started changing channels on the TV, looking for any national news that was available to study. None of the major news channels had any information, but MSNBC announced that there would be a press release from FBI headquarters that morning at 11 o'clock. I decided the best thing to do would be to watch it at my parents' place. It was sad to watch the FBI press release, as they discussed how they had busted an international cartel involved in blackmail, sex trafficking, and a variety of other crimes. 45 major cities were affected, 625 counties in all 52 states. The clients were all from the upper class of society and had political influence. In cases involving blackmail, the goal was to get the charges dropped or changes in laws to make things easier for the criminal organization. More than 1,000 people were charged with sex trafficking, 75% of whom were women and 25% men. 10% of both were homosexual, and as a result, there were additional ongoing investigations. The criminal organization operated primarily in Democratic-controlled areas of the country and existed for more than 10 years. There was no focus on any specific field. The sexual desires of the clients they served and their lifestyles were highlighted. The organization was in 25 countries, mainly operating in countries with some form of democratic government. It was organized and controlled by the Russian mafia from Belize. MSNBC presented a list of the top 30 Democratic cities in the U.S. and confirmed that all of them were on the list of cities where the FBI arrests occurred. It was frustrating to hear commentators claim that this was a planned attack orchestrated by President Trump to divert public attention from his other problems. The fact that this criminal operation was organized under a Democratic presidential administration was not mentioned once after the FBI press release concluded. My father, now completely enraged, took the remote control and switched to other cable news channels, only to discover, as he said, the same nonsense. They all blamed Trump for the corruption that the FBI uncovered. In disappointment, my mother said, "Just turn off the propaganda channels and let Jack tell us what he knows. At least what he tells us will be the truth as he knows it." Well, Mika Brzezinski, co-host of Morning Joe, says President Trump's attempts to undermine the influence of the media and control what people think are effectively undermining what the media's job should be, I said. You can go to YouTube and watch the clip as if it were broadcast live, I said. From the mouth of the horse, we learn how truthful the media is. As a news organization, their job is to control what their viewers believe. That explains why most of the media hate our president, my father said. He sees through their lies. Weren't Micah and Joe his friends when he was a Democrat? So at the end of the day, all these 3 years of anti-Trump rhetoric is because the Democratic Party and the mainstream media consider our president to be a traitor and a traitor, the mother said. The worst insult to all of them is to see him in the White House. Because of their hatred of those who left the Democratic Party, they did everything they could to destroy him, even if it meant harming the public and hiding the truth. Enough to talk about the hatred they harbor, I said. The truth has never mattered in public life and never will. Otherwise, Joe Biden and his son Hunter would be under investigation. If they were, we would be living in a completely different society. So I began to explain how it all started and what happened up to this point. When I finished, there was silence for several minutes. "I'm so sorry, son," my mother said. "I had no idea that by setting you up on a date with Sue Ellen, I was setting you up on a date with an easily accessible girl." "Mom, none of us knew," I said. "There's no point in resorting to if only or I should have. There's no point in that. We made the best decision we could based on what we knew at the time. So let's promise ourselves that we won't waste time by asking questions about our own behavior." I asked my mom for the yellow pages and started looking for a lawyer. Having found one, I called and made an appointment for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I left my parents' house, knowing that my mother would carry the guilt for the rest of her life. After leaving the divorce lawyer's office, I walked into a clinic in Jackson and got an appointment within 30 minutes. The doctor took blood for analysis. His only comment was, "If I were you, I would do the same thing." I returned to work and was in my office doing follow-up on what I had done the night before. I walked throughout the plant, checking on each person's progress on their assigned project. I answered all their questions and asked a few of my own. The group leader knocked on the door and I told him to come in. "The staff asked me to ask you if there was anything they could do," he said. "Unofficially, they value you very much because you take a genuine interest in their work. Every time they offer something to make their job easier, you find a way to do it. Having worked in manufacturing for many years, I know how frustrating it is when you don't have the right tools or materials to do the job consistently," I said. "We have a great team, and paying attention to their needs has greatly increased our productivity. The day shift manager has been tasked with adopting a few of my management techniques. Just thank our team for me for their concern, and tell them that if I need their help, I will contact them first. Sometimes the smallest gestures mean the most. I was grateful for the opportunity to be alone because what I had been keeping inside of me came out. I just sat there, letting it all out before returning to my tasks. It was already past midnight when I returned home. Ruth Truscott was waiting for me when I arrived. We headed to the Hickory House for breakfast. She noticed that my wedding ring was gone. Neither of us had seen the Arch in St. Louis before, so we decided to head there for the day. After that, we went to the St. Louis Zoo. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Ruth asked me if I wanted to talk to Sue Ellen. I thought about it for a while, and then said that maybe I should because she needed to know that she no longer had a home to return to. I had to wait until Sue Ellen was escorted to the visitor's room. I was pleased to see her wearing orange. It was obvious that she no longer looked like the petite, sophisticated Southern girl she had imagined herself to be. The facade she had created for herself was destroyed forever. I wondered if our whole life was an illusion that she created to help hide who she was and what she did. She sat down and picked up the phone as I looked at her through the glass with a tinge of sadness. Now it was clear to me that our entire life together had been a lie. "It's me," I said. "Who provided the FBI with information that helped expose the organization you were working with?" "It started in January when I started clearing out my junk mail files." "How?" she asked. "Instagirl emails sent daily," I said. 3 of them contained photos of Beth, Katie, and you from your days at Penn State. I was getting an average of 6 a day. I tried to unfollow them but couldn't because Outlook flagged them as unsafe. That Sunday when we invited them to dinner, I took your photos to take them to the FBI. Before this, I thought these must be stolen images. Within a week, I realized that my assumption was wrong. "I'm sorry," Sue said to Ellen. "My mistake was falling in love with you. The original plan was to divorce the 3 of you in 2 years." "I don't believe you when you say you're in love with me," I said. "I think your only regret is that you got caught. By the way, Ben, George, and I got search warrants. The FBI found books that had all the information about your offshore accounts. I think they'll confiscate the funds from them." It was interesting to see Sue Ellen's face turn pale. Knowing that her real earnings could have been wasted must have hurt her. "You will be served with divorce papers in the next few days," I said. "Your clients are all arrested and their careers are over. I have one question for you. Why did you and your friends choose the 3 of us as scapegoats?" For the first time in her life, Sue Ellen didn't know what to say, so I repeated the question a second time. After about 5 minutes, she said, "When we were recruited into the industry, we were trained for weeks on human behavior. One of the things our instructors focused on was political opinions. We were told that we only wanted clients with liberal views because they would justify what they do with a temperament that will benefit us. Their personalities have shown that if it is against the law, then the law is to blame, not what they do. Liberals are also known for accepting lies as truth because they, in general, do not question anything. So their view was, what is good for me is acceptable," I said, "whether it is according to society or not." "Partly, but you've simplified it too much," Sue said. "Liberals live in their own bubble and it usually has nothing to do with reality. Most liberals believe that the law was not written for them. That's how they justify everything. We didn't realize when we contacted you 3 that you weren't liberals. We were too focused on the fact that your lifestyle fit perfectly into ours, giving us a cover that we thought would never be blown. With that, I replied, we were 3 blind mice running after wives whose behavior cut off our tails with a kitchen knife. Goodbye, Sue Ellen. Any further communication will be through the lawyers. Don't try to go home as my lawyer is getting a restraining order. Order because of your connection with the Russian mafia." I hung up the phone. I got my answers, even if I didn't like them. Within minutes, I was in my truck with Ruth. "Jack, are you okay?" Ruth asked with concern. "It's hard when you realize that the woman you married never loved you," I said. "The 3 of us were chosen because our work schedule provided them with the perfect cover for what they were doing. Nothing else." "Oh, I know it will be hard at first," Ruth said. "Perhaps knowing this will make it easier to move on." "I started to move on when I believed she was selling herself," I said. "Ruth, open the glove compartment. Inside you will find the envelope I was going to check in on Monday. It's a notebook I found while going through Sue Ellen's personal belongings. I think it will lead you to her offshore accounts." Ruth opened it and, looking through it, said, "Ben and George are looking for their wives' records. If they find anything, they will bring it first thing on Monday. Maybe what I was told today is true, but knowing it and confirming it is still painful." I listened as Ruth made a cell phone call to tell her boss about the find and how she got it. When she finished the conversation, she started laughing. Remember, I said, these accounts will be mentioned in divorce court because Missouri is a property-dividing state. Jack, my boss suggested recruiting you to our team, Ruth said. Thanks to you, they will have to work hard to get permission to search the homes of those arrested. We were driving back down the interstate, talking about everything, when her cell phone rang again. I heard one side of the conversation. It was her mother who wanted to know if she was coming for dinner. Ruth explained that she was with Jack Daniel Patterson, returning from St. Louis. Then came the usual questions about who I was, what our relationship was, what we were doing in St. Louis, and whether I would come to dinner with her. Ruth said, "Listen, Mom, we're just friends for now." After a few minutes, she looked at me, rolled her eyes, and asked, "Do you want to go to dinner?" I nodded my head. "Yes," she said, "thank you," and hung up. "What caused all this?" I asked Ruth when she put down the phone. "My mom's shock when she found out that I'm with a man and it's not work-related," she said, laughing. "Get ready for an evening with 1,000 questions." "I don't think your mom will get many chances to ask me questions," I said, "after your stepfather finds out where I work." I was right. As soon as Ruth's stepfather found out where I worked, I was lost to Ruth and her mother as he became engrossed in conversation about what was happening at the plant. It was interesting to learn that the CEO was retiring and it was not clear who would be offered the position. Because of the pressure put on the day shift manager by senior management, he thought I was on top of things. The way I managed the night shift really impressed the senior management. There were no complaints from employees subordinate to me. Ruth's stepfather asked me how I met Ruth, so I explained the whole situation. His opinion of my situation was quite insightful. He, too, met his current wife when his world was falling apart. It's been a good 20 years for them. It was almost 11 o'clock at night when I took Ruth home. I found that I really enjoyed her company, and we agreed to meet the following Friday. On Sunday, 3 blind mice got together. I told the guys about my meeting with Sue Ellen and my feelings about it. Neither Ben nor George visited their wives. They liked the idea that I filed for a restraining order because of who was working for her. It was a busy week of work. Sue Ellen and her best friends were refused bail because they were a flight risk. I was surprised that Sue Ellen not only agreed to the divorce, but also easily agreed to the terms. It was agreed that I would store her personal belongings in a rented unit. My lawyer expected Judge Donald McDonald to approve it if I appeared before him in court. So on Friday afternoon, I picked up a couple of bundles of boxes to start packing her things. Her car had already been taken to the lawyer's office for sale, through a commission agent. I bought a small lockable box to hold Sue Ellen's fine jewelry, which I put in there and delivered directly to her lawyer's office, where they gave me a letter saying I had done so. Ruth and I spent the weekend together and we found ourselves growing closer. Ruth told me that my soon-to-be ex-wife and her 2 best friends were trying to negotiate a deal. The difficulty for Sue Ellen was my demand for half of her ill-gotten gains. The FBI learned that they were all legal Belizean citizens and would never be able to repay any money she earned without her cooperation. Once I moved Sue Ellen's personal belongings into storage, I put the house on the market. I wanted to get rid of the past and completely leave it behind. The divorce took 3 months. Sue Ellen had to spend 3 years in federal prison before being deported from the country. Her lawyer gave me a check from her trust for the amount the divorce judge ordered. I finally got an offer on my house and I accepted. In a divorce, I won a farm next to my parents' house and sent notice to the tenants. Ruth and I started having serious conversations about our future, so we agreed on what we wanted to do with the house before we moved. 2 things happened on the last weekend of summer. At the company's summer picnic, they announced that I was becoming the new CEO. It was a Monday to Friday job with evenings and weekends. With her mother and stepfather at a company picnic, I got down on one knee and proposed to Ruth Truscott. Of course, she said yes. What happened to Sue Ellen and her friends is another story. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.